Welcome to Risk Matters, the insurance podcast brought to you by DWF and your global guide to the latest trends and issues in the insurance and reinsurance industry. Join us as we explore topical issues, emerging technologies, and the innovative strategies that are shaping the global future of insurance.
Welcome to Risk Matters, the DWF insurance podcast. Today, my guest is Professor Martin Scheringer. Martin is a senior scientist at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, professor of environmental chemistry at Maastricht University in the Czech Republic, chair of the International Panel on Chemical Pollution. In addition to his scientific research, Martin has worked at the Science Policy Interface, providing input to the Persistent Organic Pollutants Review Committee of the Stockholm Convention. It's a great pleasure for us to have Martin with us today. And Martin, I'm going to start off by diving straight into the deep end. What is PFAS?
First of all, thank you, John, for the invitation. I'm happy to be here. And yeah, we may just jump in.
Absolutely.
And yeah, let's talk about PFAS. What are they? They are what we call organic chemicals, which means they contain carbon as the main constituent. And in the PFAS, carbon atoms form a chain. And then they carry fluorine on all the bonds of the carbon atoms that are not used to build the chain. And that's basically it, because the name PFAS stands for perfluoroalkyl substances, and alkyl is the chemical word for carbon chain. Yeah. So it's just it, that it's a fluorinated carbon chain. That's what the name means, and that's what you have to keep in mind as a user or as a non-chemist. That's basically it.
But it's not just one thing, is it? There are many PFAS out there.
Because you can make carbon chains of different lengths. You can make them very short or very long, and that varies the type of PFAS, the properties. And you can also add something that is not fluorinated to the end of the chain, and it also modifies the properties. We call this, for example, acid groups, and this makes then, for example, P4, the perfluorooctanoic acid. So we have a lot of possibilities to vary their properties, but the core thing always is this fluorinated chain. And that's also the thing that causes, on the one hand, the great properties of PFAS, but also the problems.
I see. And just going back a bit, I mean, this started off as an accidental discovery, didn't it? Going back, I think it was Roy Plunkett back in 1938, if my memory serves me, who was working on refrigerants in a laboratory and came in one day to find, to his surprise, that one of the cylinders had broken down into this white, powdery, resistant substance.
Yes, at the time in the 1920s, 30s, even 40s, there were many of these discoveries that people were working on something, chemists, and then something happened and something else came out of it. And they discovered a wide range of fascinating materials. I mean, penicillin was also a discovery of that type. That one morning he found these petri dishes full of that mold that was then toxic to bacteria. So this has happened a lot in chemistry, and and then from there it always tends to explode into a variety of other things that people can then make out of the new material.
So initially, my understanding was when it was first discovered by accident like that it was thought of so expensive to produce that didn't really have much use for it at all at that time. And then along came the Manhattan Project.
Yes. I mean, the fluorine chemistry is demanding. Yeah. Fluorine is a very extreme element. It's very aggressive and toxic and difficult to handle. So that makes PFAS more expensive than other chemicals because you always have to handle the fluorine safely. Even nowadays, that is still an important aspect of it. And then, there were extreme uses, such as the Manhattan Project, when they used fluorine to separate the heavier and lighter isotopes of uranium.
Wow.
And then it developed on into more applications of more kind of everyday life applications of this new material, Teflon, or then they called it Teflon.
That's a name that has stuck.
Yeah. It is what we call a fluoropolymer.
Yes.
And that's a type of PFAS.
Well, one wonders what would have happened to the Manhattan Project if that accidental discovery hadn't taken place.
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. And there two views here, because you could say, they wouldn't have been able to do that because wouldn't have been there. But the other way of looking at it is that somebody else would have found it because it was kind of in the air.
Yeah.
And it's always one person who makes the breakthrough, but still there are other people who are also close and they may also find out the same thing.
So moving on, PFAS today, what are its uses?
Yeah, so what makes them so special is, as we said, the fluorinated chain. The fluorine is special in that it gives them the property of they don't want to interact with anything. So they are repellent to water, to grease, to oil, to dirt. They don't interact. So this makes them impregnation agents or useful for impregnation and for lubrication. Everything where you need something that's smooth and soft and doesn't interact, doesn't stick, that's where PFAS come in. And the other important element or aspect is they are so stable. So they are very robust against heat, against aggressive chemicals, against high voltage. Because the carbon-fluorine bond is so strong. It's the strongest single bond that carbon can form. And to break a bond in a chemical, you always need energy. And for normal chemicals, there's always some energy in the environment, be it sunlight or bacteria that can kind of eat the chemical. But the carbon-fluorine bond is so strong that there's no process in the outer environment that can break that bond.
So a huge plus in terms of how it can be used, but a huge minus in terms of it doesn't break down.
Exactly.
How do you get rid of it?
Exactly. So, and that was known to people at the time, but somehow they were thinking at the time the solution to pollution is dilution.
That rolls off the tongue.
Yes, and when you are at the beginning of such a development, it may actually work because you have such a large volume of the world around you.
Oh, I see.
It doesn't really matter the little bit that you're doing. But as soon as you ramp up production of something, which happened after World War II, then the amounts become so big then that it no longer works that way.
So we see it in so many things: textiles, leather, electrical equipment, cleaning products, pesticides, food packaging, firefighting foam. I mean, it's everywhere, isn't it? And of course, the non-stick pan.
Yes. I think that's what they even did in the 1950s as a first every person application of Teflon, the non-stick pan, frying or cookware.
Yeah.
And again, everywhere where you would need impregnation, lubrication, and robust materials, PFAS would be handy. And they are the kind of do-it-all chemicals for that kind of these purposes.
So when did the dawning start? When was the realization that this production of so many products, the development of new products, I mentioned firefighting foam, etc., doing a great job putting out fires in air bases and so on. If there was a plane crash and a fire, bring on the firefighting foam and it would save lives. But at the same time, there's the downside. So tell me about the downside and when it was realized that there was going to be a longer-term problem.
Yes, that was already early on. Because to the chemists, it was obvious that this stability was there and that the stability would turn into something undesirable in the environment. We call this then persistence, so the longevity, durability, stability, that's the positive names for it. But in environmental chemistry, we call it persistence. And that's, of course, what they knew, what they saw already in the 1950s, 60s. They found the chemicals, these PFOA, as an important processing aid to make Teflon. They found it in many areas already, and they found it in the blood of their workers. And soon after, they also found that it was toxic, that it increased the liver size of mice. They used mice as testing organisms, and they saw that it was active and caused the liver to swell, which always is an indication of toxicity. So
yes,
that was in the 60s.
Goodness me. And yet it took, is it Rob Bilott, as seen in Dark Waters and so on, to really bring it to public attention across the world. Yes,
that is a strange and also fascinating kind of development that for decades it was possible that this kind of went on and on and on, and they knew it, and nobody else outside of these companies and of that also perhaps a small group of occupational hygienists or whoever exactly it was, that nobody else was aware of that. And then in the late 1990s, it kind of exploded into our faces. Exactly.
I see. We've sort of seen this as a US problem, I suppose, again, because of the movie, because of the litigation in America. The plaintiff tort bar in the US is always imaginative, and they jumped on this bandwagon. But what about the rest of the world? What about Europe?
The legal system is very different in Europe, obviously, but the chemistry is the same.
Chemistry is the same, but have we got areas of Europe? I mean, I was very fortunate to be at your talk last year where we were both sharing a platform at the LMA in the Lloyd's Library. And some of the charts and the pictures you were showing then were startling of the danger areas across Europe, for example. Areas, take Switzerland, for example, where one sees the mountains, the beautiful scenery. One would think that's the last place on earth that's going to be affected by PFAS. But tell us about the Swiss experience, please.
Yeah, it's the Swiss experience, but also beyond in Europe. So it's everywhere, be it Switzerland, and we can come back to that because there are also some interesting aspects of the Swiss case. But there are also many other places in Europe. It's basically uniform because they were also, like in the US, they were made and used here as well by the same companies. And there are these places where the production happens or is still ongoing, where the surroundings of these factories, of these plants are heavily contaminated with PFAS from these processes, but also from the firefighting foams, because that was a very difficult and also unfortunate practice that they used these foams also for training purposes. And they used large amounts and just let them out. And then they were not able to really contain all of that. And at least some of it then, with the water, went into the soil and groundwater at these facilities. And that's why at many military sites, they have these places, and also at many airports. Not just because of actual fires with planes, but also just from the training. So there is hundreds and thousands of sites, and there is a map made by a consortium of journalists called the Forever Pollution Project, led by Stéphane Noël, a journalist at Le Monde in Paris. And that map is available online, and it shows more than 17,000 sites in Europe.
17,000
sites with known, so measured, confirmed PFAS contamination of water or soil.
My goodness.
Yeah, so it's really everywhere. That's why I said the chemistry is the same, the uses are the same. The way we react to it, the legal system is different, the political system, and that's also very important, very interesting. But the problem as such is the same.
We are starting to see activity in the Netherlands, for example, at the moment in terms of class actions kicking off.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see more and more of that across Europe, given the nature of the problem and the fact that it's not going to go away.
Yeah. And one of the first problems and causes of these lawsuits is water, drinking water. Yes. The water providers are required to deliver the drinking water at a certain standard, of cleanliness or quality, and they have to push the levels, whatever it may be, in the water, have to push the levels down to below these standards. And that is very expensive. And that's why they are the first also to go against the PFAS industry. And ask or call for the money. Yes.
And I read also how it's been waste product from water purifying sites has ended up back in being used in agriculture. And what happens then is there's almost a sense of inevitability, but it's going to get back into water courses and contaminate a wider and wider area.
Exactly. It circulates, it starts a circulation, and because they don't degrade, these perfluorinated chains, they just circulate with water, we call this sewage sludge or biosolids.
Yeah.
So sometimes contaminated wastewater went into a wastewater treatment plant, and then quite some of it was taken out of the water and entered the sludge or was associated with the sludge. And then often these sludges were placed or put on the fields because they also contain nutrients and they were used as fertilizers. And that was the starting point of such a chain of circulation of the PFAS and other contaminants in these sludges. So in addition to firefighting foams, these sludges are the other main pathway by which PFAS have entered the broad environment in many countries. So even coming back to Switzerland, the green-looking fields and the hills,
beautiful mountains
up to the mountains, cows grazing, but the cows then took up a lot of PFAS from soil, to which they applied these sewage sludges, and they were found in meat, in beef, 2 years ago from eastern Switzerland, and it was a shock to people because they had to close down these farms and said we can't sell that meat, that beef anymore. And then they started looking into the cases and trying to find where it came from, and they found it was sewage sludge that was applied at the latest in 1983.
Oh my goodness!
40 years ago, and still very high levels of PFAS. In that case, this chemical PFAS that sticks out in these soils, because again, they are forever chemicals, they don't go away. So these farmers were shocked by that discovery, and they also said, it's not our fault, we didn't do this, and they are right, they didn't do this. So they are now the victims of a development that is so complicated, such a long-term development, and very unfortunate.
And presumably this will be repeated, this pattern, across the world.
Yeah, I think it is repeating. We find that also, in all the, let's call it the industrialized countries where PFAS have been made and used a lot. And it hits hard. I mean, these people, they are losing their existence in a way.
Yeah.
So it's the sludge on the fields, and in Switzerland, another case is the lakes, and there is the firefighting foams, because they did a lot of practicing at the shore of these lakes, and then the foams just went into the lake water. And now the fish have levels that are very high, much too high for consumption. So also the fishermen are losing their existence.
My goodness, when you see those lakes in Switzerland, they look so crystal clear.
Yeah, would never expect that. But
it's lurking underneath.
Exactly, it's lurking underneath because you can't see them. Of course, they're highly dissolved, they are invisible. You don't see them. Then they're on the fish. And then we found that because a person from one of these lakes had his blood tested and had astronomically high levels of PFAS.
We've also seen it in food packaging.
Yes. That is, again, the impregnation function of it. So that was deliberate, to put it on wrappers for hamburgers, pizza boxes, baking papers, to make them grease resistant. And to hold the food, to hold the soup, also plates or cups made of plant-based materials, of leaves, sugar cane leaves or banana leaves. And something has to be put on that material, on these leaves to make them stable so that they can hold your soup.
So on the one hand, we're seeing these containers that profess to be natural products, but the hidden element is PFAS.
Yes. And I think that is a very bad thing that people did here. They sell this, they offer this to tell people, here you can avoid single-use plastics. It's a good thing to do, use our banana leaf or everything. But then they don't tell them that this is impregnated with a high amount of PFAS. Right.
I remember one of your slides that showed an example of that, and you really had to break it down to the constituent parts of the container. And there it was, staring in the face. The PFAS that was there.
Right. And because there are no labels are required anywhere in the world for PFAS, so people just can't know. And you could imagine a banana leaf would not hold your soup without any treatment. That is something you may be able to see. But still, these things were offered to people. People were just happily taking them. And I think it's unfair to kind of even trick people into this.
Well, in some parts of the world, that will give rise to greenwashing claims.
Yeah.
We've seen it in California. We'll see it in other parts of the world, and we'll see claims against directors and officers who knowingly are putting products of this type on the market and making these claims about the natural quality of the product they're selling, when all the time lurking inside it is this dangerous PFAS.
Yes, exactly. So this is one of the best cases that shows how difficult all of this is and how entangled the problems are. And you want to do something good, but then you use PFAS and it turns into something that is not good for a completely different reason. And it's so pervasive.
So we're talking about the danger of PFAS, but what is the danger? What are the health consequences? I mean, they seem to, on the one hand, we have the allegations of what the consequences are. On the other hand, we have evidence and we have report. I mean, I'm looking at some of the highlights from the US National Academy of Sciences report. Mm-hmm. I think that came out 2 or 3 years ago.
Yes, 2022, yeah.
2022. And they split it up there into 3 categories. The first category, sufficient evidence of an association, and they've listed there decreased antibody response, decreased infant and fetal growth, and increased risk of kidney cancer in adults. And there was a close association with those conditions. And then there was the limited suggestive evidence of an association, increased risk of breast cancer in adults, liver enzyme alterations, increased risk of pregnancy-induced hypertension, increased risk of testicular cancer, thyroid cancer, and increased risk of ulcerative colitis. So with the first 2 categories, one can well see why this is causing so much litigation.
Right.
And this evidence, an independent report in the US, will provide some support for that. And then we've got other categories, other types of cancers, cardiovascular, etc., which have effectively been ruled out. Yes. So there is some selectivity over.
Yes. So the way to sum this up in a way, the effect, what happens to the body is like a shotgun shot. It's like a shotgun that you fire onto the body of a person, and everywhere you find some of these damages. Because if you go through the list, it's the liver, it's the kidneys, it's the thyroid gland, it's the immune system, it's the reproductive system, it's the lipid metabolism. So you see, it's really everywhere. And it includes lots of chronic diseases that develop over years, or that take years and years and years to manifest. So it's not really obvious from the very beginning. That's another aspect of it. Also, perhaps even historically, that there were people who were underestimating the problem because these diseases are chronic diseases, and you don't see them immediately. So there's no quick test that would tell you, oh, that PFAS causes thyroid gland impairment, and that takes time to learn. But they did have the time. They could learn a lot already in the 60s and 70s, and they made experiments. Yes. They made experiments even with monkeys at 3M, I think it was, which is very unusual because you need all the ethical clearance. Monkeys are so close to humans, you don't normally use monkeys in testing chemicals, totally not. And they used the monkeys to find out the circulation of the chemicals in the body, the enrichment in the liver, and all of that. And they could also see many of these diseases or similar forms of these diseases in the monkeys. So somehow I think they were able to learn it, and they were even intent that they tried. They did this because they knew they had to do something to find out. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done the test with the monkeys. Why would you do that? So there was, I guess, a suspicion they had, but somehow that was not really visible to the broader, so not the public, and also not the broader regulatory system. So yes, it is a lot of things that they can do, or that they do in the body of people. But in a way, this is really what we're not used to also as humans. It's not something like a pesticide, where you take the pesticide and you immediately develop a rash, or you really heavily intoxicated and you fall down and you may even die immediately.
Yes.
Here it takes years and years and years.
It's a build-up.
Yeah. And also just the diseases, they form in some people, but not in others. We always have that distribution of in the population. We have some people who are more robust, and some people who are more sensitive, and not all of them, even from the same dose, will develop the same disease. So you have a very, very non-uniform picture in the population. In the end now, from a public health point of view, we have to put together, let's say in the UK there are 60 million people or so. You have a puzzle with 60 million pieces that you have to put together to form the picture of the actual PFAS-induced diseases in the population, because there are so many different people who may or may not respond in that or that way.
And I guess the proximity to a site is going to be very relevant too, especially if it's a heavily contaminated area.
Yes. As soon as that is given, that we can see people live close to such a site, then of course there is much more of a causal connection, a causal link you can make, which helps. But often, of course, these people also have the highest doses. So for these people, it's very unfortunate that they are so close. But at least it may be possible to really establish the causal link. Whereas a person living somewhere in the middle of the country and eating meat and fish at the normal rate and accumulating a certain dose and then perhaps develop liver or liver disease, you will not find the
causation is going to be much harder in that sort of scenario.
Yes,
I can see that. And of course, when one looks at how important it is to drink water these days, are you safe drinking water out of a plastic bottle, even given the microplastics that are lurking in there?
There are many aspects to that, yes, true. I mean, food packaging is a real problem in itself and challenge, not just because of PFAS, because of many other chemicals that may come out of the packaging and also the microplastic particles that may be in the bottle. It's always safe to drink water, or safer, I would say, to drink water out of glass or metal or porcelain or china.
Goodness.
That's the safer way of handling all kinds of drinks and food.
But don't use a straw, because the straw contains PFAS. Probably
it may too. or a metal straw.
My goodness, yes. We don't see the sale of many metal straws with glass bottles to have a safe drink of water.
Yeah, no, it's of course, in a way it is outrageous and not what it should be. But yeah, anyway, for food and drinking water and beverages in general, it's better to avoid all kinds of plastic bottles generally, beyond the PFAS case, really.
So what about the future? What are we able to do to protect people?
Yeah, there are at least two main aspects here. One is kind of looking backwards, try to, in the end, ban the most used PFAS in many of their uses, to stop the emissions, to turn off the tap. That's very important.
And will the Stockholm Convention help in that regard?
The Stockholm Convention certainly helps because it bans chemicals globally, and it also includes already several PFAS that have been included in the convention. That is certainly a very important step. But there are many more, and the convention is not meant to cover hundreds of chemicals. The convention is meant to really identify the worst of the worst and address them specifically. But you have to go beyond that and have to have a broader system of regulating them, at least. Perhaps not banning them all, but at least regulating them in a much stricter way than has been the case. So that is one aspect. We have a lot of work to find the uses and regulate these uses and try to eliminate as many uses as possible. And the second aspect of this is really the way forward is to find alternatives.
Yes.
And that requires a lot of research and development, but importantly, there has been a lot of that already. And many alternatives are already on the market. And there are many interesting, fascinating stories about that as well. For example, the firefighting foams, where we would think this is a perfect case for PFAS, because you need something that spreads out smoothly, doesn't burn itself, cuts off the fire from the air. That's a perfect job for PFAS. But the company 3M, who made these PFAS-based foams, they also made or developed a PFAS-free foam. The same company already more than 20 years ago, and that foam is as effective as the PFAS-containing foam. So imagine, it's the same company.
Yes.
And as a chemist, I always say, chemistry can do much more than PFAS. So in a way, it's great to see that they are so good at their chemistry and can develop that. And this PFAS-free foam is now has been in use at airports with a full task of extinguishing jet fuel fires, so it's effective, and has been there for long. But for some reason, it sticks with people that we would have to have PFAS because they sound so kind of high-end, high technology. But there are many cases where we have already good enough or even better alternatives.
And with these alternatives, do we know whether there's a risk or not of a problem developing in the future?
Yeah, of course, that's a key question as well. And of course, they have to be tested absolutely for toxicity. They should not be toxic and harmful. In terms of persistence, of course, as long or as soon as it's no longer a PFAS, it is an improvement. Because nothing is as persistent as PFAS, because the carbon-fluorine bond is the strongest bond.
Understood.
So as soon as you go away from that, we have solved that problem. It doesn't mean that all the replacements are perfect, but we can find our way out of that kind of, I would call it a dead end. It's kind of a dead end chemistry. And somebody has compared them to a Swiss Army knife. They couldn't do everything. So you have a saw, you have a knife, you have a corkscrew, you have a screwdriver. But if you use the proper tool, if you have to saw something, you would use a saw. If you have to cut something, you would have to use a proper knife. And if you want to uncork a bottle, you use a professional corkscrew. And they're all better tools than the knife in their application. So it's not just that PFAS would be better, we would have to accept poorer performance of the alternatives, but often the alternatives are even better if they are tailor-made. The thing is, we have to piece together solutions, tailor-made solutions that were offered by PFAS just as a general thing that PFAS can do. Now we have to put more work into that, but it's possible.
There's hope.
More than hope.
Thank you all very much for listening. We hope you found it insightful, and thank you to Professor Martin Scheringer for joining me today. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode in the Risk Matters series.
Thank you for listening to Risk Matters, the DWF Insurance Podcast. We hope you join us again soon for future podcasts in our series.